Hi, I am Jessica Ridgley. I am a doctor here at Skyridge Primary Care, and I work for Skyridge Medical Center. I do my webinars about every quarter. So my next one will be in August, but I am doing one today on environmental toxins. And you can see in my slide that is my primary professional email. So if you do have further questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them later on or after this presentation. Behind my name, I am internal medicine. I also do integrative medicine, and I'm board certified in that. I also do osteopathic and neuromuscular medicine. I'm board certified in that as well. But let's get to the topic tonight. I am talking about environmental toxins, and this is something that is pretty near and dear to my heart. I feel that over 1/3 of a lot of the health issues that we deal with on a day-to-day basis happen because of the toxins that are in and around us. They're unseen. We don't know about them. We just kind of live with them. Sometimes we hear about them, but we don't many times know enough about them to do anything about them. So my job tonight is to hopefully educate you on these environmental toxins that we have in our everyday life and hopefully give you some tips and ways to improve and be able to stop these environmental toxins from wreaking havoc on your health as much as possible. It is not something that we can completely get rid of, but there are ways to diminish it as much as to a good amount. So let's move forward here. Okay, it's not moving forward. Give me 1 second. There we go. So the plan of action, our cleanup plan, is we're going to first talk about food. We're going to talk about toxins that are in food. We're going to talk about how to have a cleaner diet. Then we're going to go on to water. We're going to talk about what is in our drinking water, why we should be concerned, and things that we can do about that. We're also going to talk about air pollution, air toxins, not only outside, many times we know about those, but also things that are in our home that we may not be as familiar with. And how do we protect ourselves from these things? Also, we're going to talk about the home and more about what kind of things are in our environment in our home and how we can diminish those as much as possible. All right, so my first kind of joke, from a environmental perspective, there's a lot of things that are going on in our environment every day that we are not aware of or we don't really want to be aware of. Sometimes it's easier to put our head in the sand. These things are much closer than we actually recognize. So I hope today that you will be able to feel empowered to help yourself for that purpose. So let's talk about food. There's a lot in this slide. It seems like a lot of words, but really there is a lot here. So let's talk about food dyes. So the biggest ones that we need to be concerned about are red 40, yellow 5, and yellow 6. All three of these have benzidine in it, which is a carcinogen. The interesting thing about these is that the food industry is allowed to use these in the US, but in Europe they are not. Our Fanta soda has red 40 and yellow 6 in it. In the UK, they're only allowed to use coloration with pumpkin and carrot. The other thing is that in Europe, all food dyes carry a warning about hyperactivity in children. They actually have completely banned Skittles and Starburst because of these different colorations. So let's talk about red 40. Red 40 is in soda, candy, gelatin desserts, pastries, and sausage, actually. Red 40 is in sausage. And it is actually one of the worst ones as far as hyperactivity goes. And it causes a lot of hypersensitivity and actually can cause a lot of issues that children have with food is from the red 40. Then we also have yellow 5, that's found in gelatin, desserts, candy, pet food, and baked goods. And this is very well known to cause hyperactivity in children. And then we have yellow 6, which is found in beverages, candy, and baked goods, and is not only associated with hypersensitivity, but has an association with tumors in the adrenal gland and the kidneys. So those are artificial food dyes. I highly recommend to try to stay away from them as much as possible. We also have issues with pesticides in our food products. The organophosphates as well as organochlorines are the most common ones. The neonicotinoids are actually well known for killing the bee population and has been banned in Europe as well. We have not banned them here, but it is the reason that bees are endangered at this point. The organophosphates is like Roundup, and that is everywhere, especially as spring has come into come here to now it's springtime, and a lot of people are using Roundup. They use it on their weeds and in their gardens, but it not only causes problems with our food products, but it can cause problems with our pets as well. It is associated with Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, hormonal and blood cancers, as well as neurodevelopment disorders in children, and would be neurodivergence or specifically autism in this case. So I highly recommend not using Roundup at all if possible, and also not getting any foods or products that have Roundup in it. Many individuals don't know that Roundup is even used on sugar as well as cotton. So even some of our cotton clothes can have Roundup on them. So that's one concern, is the pesticides. The next concern is our artificial sweeteners. Those are sucralose, aspartame, and saccharin. The aspartame and saccharin are known for the potential to cause cancers or being carcinogenic. Sucralose, for many years, was thought to be kind of this inert substance that tasted sweet and really didn't cause many problems. But this is actually probably the worst one of all of them. With sucralose, was found to be associated with leukemia in a study in 2016 from Rasmini Institute. It is also all of them are associated with obesity and weight gain, as well as increased appetite, because how it affects your metabolism. So, we're sitting here using these to not become diabetic, but then it drives up our urge to eat and our feeling like we're hungry. So then we end up eating more and more calories, causing more likelihood to have diabetes. So in a sense, it's as bad, if not worse, than having a little bit of sugar from that perspective. During pregnancy, it can cause alteration metabolically and increased inflammation. That was found in February of 2023. Sucralose can also enter the breast milk. That was found in 2019. It can worsen irritable bowel syndrome and inflammatory bowel disease. That was found in 2018. It increases glucose intolerance, which kind of goes back to the metabolic dysfunction. It can also change the gut microbiome, and there have been a lot of things that have been found in the gut microbiome that help us mentally, cardiovascularly. Pretty much every system is affected by the gut microbiome, and including our metabolism and our satiety. So changes in the gut microbiome could also kind of make us want to eat more. And then the one that is the most interesting to me, but it was found recently and is not the most well studied yet, is then 2023 in Toxicology and Environmental Health, they did have this question of genotoxicity from sucralose. And what is genotoxicity? That means that it can actually deregulate or cause problems with our DNA. And that's pretty serious. So I do believe that as they continue to study, that is going to show some carcinogenic effect as well. So do recommend staying away from the artificial sweeteners. Then we also have preservative. And there's different preservatives. Some of them, are things that are not bad in smaller amounts. The propylparaben, I do highly recommend staying away from. It acts as an estrogenic substance in the body and can actually diminish fertility. It can cause girls to have earlier periods and for boys to have delayed onset in puberty. These can be found in tortillas and bread products, dairy, meat products, and there is some cross-contamination. Then there's BHA and BHT. This is kind of unclear, but there was some thought that it could cause cancer in smaller mammals. Levels have not actually been determined. This is found in potato chips, cereal, frozen sausage, and enriched rice, candies, and Jell-O. Nitrates and nitrites. This is interesting. This is something that is found in barbecue when you cook the meat to the point of kind of burning the outside. So anytime you grill or smoke and you cause kind of a char, then that would cause some nitrates and nitrites. It's also found in some fermented foods, and in higher amounts, eating a significant amount of it can definitely cause cancer. It's also found in cold cut meats and sausages. You also have the sulfur and sulfites, which really for these, it's more of like an allergy-related illness associated with asthma and can destroy vitamin B and E in food. So those are kind of the big preservatives that you want to be aware of. And if you can try to get foods that don't have that, then that's the best. So let's talk about how we kind of stay away from these different things. So one of my big ones, and I give this to all my patients, is the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. So what's in the Dirty Dozen? We have strawberries, spinach, kale, collard mustard greens, peaches, pears, nectarines, apples, grapes, bell and hot peppers, cherries, blueberries, and green beans. So all of these, I would highly, highly, highly recommend getting organic. I do not recommend ever eating them unless they are organic, because it's not just a coating. It's not like you can stick them in vinegar and water and wash it away. A lot of these pesticides have actually kind of grown into the plant. And then our Clean 15, there's avocados, sweet corn, pineapples, onions, papayas, sweet peas, asparagus, honeydew melon, kiwi, cabbage, mushrooms, mangoes, sweet potatoes, watermelon, and carrots. And of course, this is not a very complete list, but the big one you want to focus on is the Dirty Dozen. And the Clean 15, you don't have to worry as much about it. I know, like, for example, bananas are on the Clean 15, and they're not on this specific one from 2023, but I have looked it up before because my family eats a lot of bananas, actually. And at one point in time, they didn't have organic bananas, and my kids were kind of bummed. And so I looked it up and I said, "Oh, that's okay. You can go get the regular bananas." They're like, "Oh, you're going to let us get regular bananas?" And I was like, "Yeah, they're good." So I do follow this and I pay attention to whether something is on the Dirty Dozen. I will never buy berries that are not organic because of this. All right, so food rules. Like, what are the ways that we can kind of minimize these effects? One, follow the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. It's a very helpful resource. You can Google it anytime in the grocery store, and it will be easy to find. I also recommend eating grass-fed beef, pasture-raised chicken, and wild meats. It's interesting because everybody has this association that red meats cause an increase in cholesterol, but the studies that were done on grass-fed beef actually did not show a significant increase in cholesterol. This is different than grain-fed beef, which does. Grain-fed beef is a little fattier. They also produces omega-6s in grain-fed beef, where there's omega-3s in the grass-fed beef. So I do highly recommend sticking with the grass-fed beef, pasture-raised chicken, eggs from pasture-raised chickens. And I am going to state that these are not perfect. Our food industry is not the best. And even getting meats from trying to be the absolute best we can with that is not 100%, but it's much better than getting some of the other meats that you would get that are raised in a way that are not humane. So my third one is don't overcook and rarely eat cured and processed meats. So don't overcook your meat like you would a barbecue. You can grill, but you just don't want to overcook the meat when you do it. Smoking at a lower temperature is okay as long as you don't over smoke it. So it just kind of depends on how you cook the meats. Stay away from all artificial sweeteners. I mean, I don't think that they really give us much at all. I do feel the ones that are safe is stevia, which if you're a bitter taster, you will taste bitter and you will have that taste at the end of the bite if you have stevia in it. So another one that can be super helpful is monk fruit extract. Monk fruit is actually very healthy and doesn't have any significant issues. There is also the sugar alcohols such as erythritol and xylitol. These do have some side effects, including some irritation of the stomach and intestines, as well as a little bit of bloating or gas, and it kind of depends on the person. So you can try those. They don't have any significant harmful effects, but I would go more towards stevia and monk fruit extract. Be wary of preservatives. Now, there's some preservatives that are not a problem, but especially if they have the propylparaben, or if they're cured meats that have the nitrites and nitrates, I would definitely stay away from those. And you can get them without. Find anything that is naturally dyed and do not use the artificial dyes. The artificial dyes have a lot of questions about them and are not overall safe. And I think anywhere there, like a large portion of the world is stating that they ban it, but we say it's okay, is very questionable to me. So I would just stay away from dyes as much as you possibly can. Also, when it comes to storage for food, I highly recommend using glass. Also, do not cook anything in plastic. And I'm not a fan of the microwave in general, but I will say that I would not ever microwave anything in plastics and or store anything in plastics because of the breakdown of the food acids in with the plastics. But I do highly recommend using glass for any kind of container where you are preserving the food or saving it for a while. All right, moving on. So let's talk about water. Water is very interesting because the EPA states that certain levels of chemicals are safe, but many chemicals actually don't have a safe level. One of those would be such as dioxane. Dioxane is something that is found in a lot of different water supplies and is not safe at any level. The EWG, which is the Environmental Working Group, they are the ones who produce the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. They actually have the ability to go on their EWG site and look up a water supply district. So you can look up Lone Tree, Highlands Ranch, Parker, and see what's actually in the water. And the EWG actually will tell you the amount that it exceeds its guidelines as to what is safe. So with the EWG, and we're looking at the Parker water supply right now, arsenic is 34 times the amount that's considered safe. There's bromodichloromethane, which is 67 times. There's haloacetic acids. There's all these names that, some of them we are familiar with, like uranium, chloroform, arsenic, some of those, and some of them were not. But what I will tell you is that they're not safe. And these are definitely found just in your tap water. So I think that it's very important to understand that these things are in there. When it comes to the arsenic and the uranium, they the arsenic and the uranium is something that is actually found in the soil here, so it's pretty much in every water supply. Organic arsenic is something that our body has the ability to break down to some level. But if you have too much, then the body starts to become overwhelmed by that system. And when it comes to these types of chemicals, it is best to kind of stay away from them as much as possible. So then we say, well, what are we going to do? Like, if we can't drink our tap water, which actually, another thing that I wanted to mention about that is there are chlorines in the tap water, which many times turns into chloramines. And chloramines are actually very toxic to humans. Also, chlorine is very similar to iodine, and there is question on how much chlorine actually can interact with the thyroid as well. So the chlorine is absolutely necessary from the perspective of making sure the bacteria is not in the water supply and keeping it safe, but at the same time, it is not really safe for us to be drinking. So let's go forward and see, what do we do? Well, plastic is not a good option. They are not any better. For one, they're horrible for the environment. They are causing lots of trash in the ocean, but they also cause little tiny plastics to go into the water over time that it sits in the plastic, and that creates a lot of serious effects. So plastic water bottles are not better. So let's talk about the microplastics that are found in bottled water. Nestle Pure Life is by far the worst. And then there is Aquafina, which isn't great. Tanzani is probably the best, but of the ones that we typically have. And then, there's the Evian and San Pellegrino. But this was just looking at the microplastics in the water. And when we talk about plastics, the plastics have BPA, which has been known for a long time to be toxic. Well, then they changed it to BPS. BPS is still toxic. Then they changed it to like BPE and BPF. So there's all these BP plastics that they have made, thinking they're making it better and not toxic. BPF is actually very estrogenic, causing in the body, and has been found to cause issues with delayed puberty in boys. So plastics are definitely not the way to go. There's also polyethylene terephthalate. I'm going to talk more about phthalates later on in the talk, but that is something that you definitely want to stay away from as well. And so these were, this one doesn't exactly say if they were 1 liter or 16-ounce bottles, but I know when I looked it up, it said most 1 liter bottles of water plastics were found to contain 240,000 pieces of plastic, microplastics. So what do we do, right? Like, this is concerning. So the best thing to do is to filter your water, and it's not as difficult as most people think it is. For one, activated charcoal does take out around 70% of the different toxins in the water, and that is including some of the plastics, because the plastics have a little bit of a harder time getting through a filter. So there's obviously better activated charcoals than others, but the Pure, the Brita, they work. Your home fridge actually has some pretty decent ones, so if you keep that up to date, that is super helpful. And you can use it straight from the fridge from a water filtration perspective. Just from the easiest perspective, the activated charcoal works. My favorite is the reverse osmosis. It takes out around 99% of all different toxins. It is antibacterial. It is a little bit more expensive, and you do have to maintain it with the filter system, but it is pretty much, from an expense perspective, probably the best overall. Then there's ion filtration. Ion filtration or ion exchange is about 90 to 99%, depending on the system. So it's kind of you get what you buy and how much you pay. It's not quite as good as reverse osmosis, a little bit cheaper, and it's not as good as the reverse osmosis at taking out heavy metals, talking about like uranium and arsenic, and also it does not remove all the bacteria. So infiltration is not as good when it comes to that as a reverse osmosis. The best overall, but also the most expensive, is distillation. Now, you can get distilled water in the store in a plastic bottle. So I don't recommend doing that. And a distillation system is actually really expensive. So I would stay away from anything in plastics, and that even includes going with a big, hard plastic bottle and filling it up. And you're like, well, I'm going to use it quickly, so it doesn't matter. No, I would say activated charcoal is a much better option than even filling something up with that's a plastic bottle, even if it's going to be sitting there for a short period of time. So that is what I'd recommend for the water filtration. All right. So we're going to move on to air pollution. And I thought this made a pretty distinct statement about air pollution and, what we try to do. But at the same time, if all of us are doing this, then we still are making a very significant difference. All right, air pollution. So air pollution is scary. It bothers me the most because it's the one that I feel least able to control. But there are some ways that we can be helpful to ourselves in regards to the air pollution. It is the largest environmental health risk. This was stated by the European Union, who is very much more inclined when it comes to the health aspects than the United States is. So when it comes to that, outside the home, carbon monoxide obviously is one of the biggest. That has to do with traffic. Ozone is also becoming higher and higher, and that's more of a problem. Also something that we find with aerosols, nitrogen dioxide, sulfur dioxide, and particulate matter. So here in Colorado, obviously, when we have fires, there is a lot of particulate matter that create issues and cause a lot of lung issues for people. But it's not just outside the home. We also have it inside the home. We have particulate matter, which is probably one of the top ones from that perspective. We also have it in the cosmetics and toiletries. Those are the aerosols, the sprays that we have. Those absolutely cause air pollution. Formaldehyde, radon, molds, paints. The thing to understand is that these even come from like our fragrances, and those have a lot of toxins called phthalates and parabens that actually, as you burn them or you heat them up to fragrance the home, actually causes it to be in the air and you can breathe it in. And like I said, I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of those a little bit later in here, but that is really concerning. You have to be very careful when it comes to fragrances. I highly recommend getting candles that are fragranced with essential oils and not artificial perfumes. All right. So how does air pollution affect us? For pregnancy, depending on how much the air pollution is around you, it can cause low birth weight in children. It can cause pregnancy complications. For children, it causes asthma, it causes slower development of the lung function, developmental problems. So when we talk about neurodivergence, air pollution is actually the number one associated thing that can cause autism. So, and a lot of these toxins are, but the air pollution is by far the number one. And we're seeing a definitive rise in neurodivergence and ADHD and autism, and air pollution is the number one cause of autism. There is more wheezing and coughing, and it is the beginning of atherosclerosis or plaquing in the arteries because of inflammation from breathing in these toxins. For adults, it can still cause asthma, it can cause coronary artery disease, stroke, which is atherosclerosis, lung cancer, which is something we're seeing more and more even in people who do not smoke or have not been around smoke. If they've lived in certain areas that have high amount of pollution, it can cause lung cancer. Chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, even without smoking, and it can actually cause asthma. And then as we go into the elderly, all the same things as the adults, but in increased decline in lung function, diabetes, increased dementia, heart attack, heart failure, and strokes. All right, so what can we do about the air pollution? It's a little bit more insidious because we can't really see it. We kind of know about it, but it's kind of hard to do something about it. So one of the things that I talk about with the air pollution and helping out is number one is plant trees. The more plants you have around you, the better off you're going to be. Put plants in your homes. There's specifically certain plants, especially like snake plants, or what they'll also call mother-in-law tongue, or like ficus trees, and some of these others that are actually inside the home can help really change out the toxins and ensure that you have better air in your home. So it's not just planting trees outside. You can have different plants on the inside of your house that will really help overall. Also use less natural gas, and that's somewhat of a problem because most of our heat is through natural gas, but I do recommend trying to minimize it. One of the things that I found out recently, I did a test, is trying to find some different tests to bring into my clinic. And I found, and in this particular test, I found that I had a specific toxin in my blood, which was a breakdown product of natural gas. And it was because I was cooking with a gas stove. So knowing that I had it, and if I had it, then the rest of my family did, we did decide to go to an electric stove because of that. Also, don't use aerosols. Aerosols are not good, so much better to use the pump than the aerosol. Don't burn wood or trash. Change air filters consistently. I do recommend changing them as often as they say, and not waiting beyond that. So at least a minimum of every 6 months to a year is typically dependent on the filter, how often you need to change it. So radon is something that can actually come up from the ground, and you can have this issue come up even if you bought a house and it was checked out for radon and everything was good, you can still have that come up later. So you do want to make sure that you're checking the radon about every 10 years and making sure that that's not an issue so that you can mitigate that if possible. So this is probably, the next one is probably one of most people's least favorite, and that is keeping the thermostat at 65 in the winter and 75 in the summer. We do this in my house. I can say that my husband loves it in the wintertime and I love it in the summertime, but we both deal with it because we know it's best overall for the environment and also for helping out in the house and using less natural gas. So also, I do not recommend exercising outside if there's bad air quality. If you go to, even if it's really nice outside, I guess you want to work out outside. I want to too, but it's much better to work out in an environment that has filtration of the air that's coming in and out. And then you also can use the HEPA filters, which is going to be probably one of the best when it comes to the air filtration. All right, let's talk about house. Now, this is one of them that can get really scary and because it's in so much. So some of our big ones are flame retardants that we find that in a lot more than you realize, but most people know of it in our furniture. Parabens is another big one. We talked a little bit about a paraben, the propylparaben, and how it can cause estrogenic effects. Same thing with all parabens, doesn't matter what type of paraben it is. Phthalates are nasty little chemicals that are found in so much that it's really important to try to stay away from those as much as possible. DMDM is just something that can cause more of like an allergic type of reaction. Chloral sulfates do have issues, which I'll talk about more. That is probably one of the lesser of the house toxins. But triclosan, along with the phthalates, the paraben, the flame retardants, are nasty. Triclosan is an antimicrobial found in most of our antibacterial products. The EPA has not banned it. It has been banned in Europe, and it has been banned for good reason, and we will talk about that. Some of the places that we find these things is going to be in our personal care products. So parabens and phthalates are found in shampoos and conditioners and cosmetics and our fragrances, perfumes, as well as the fragrances in our candles. Like Yankee Candle is not so insignificant. And then processed foods, we find them some in our processed foods. There's paraben wax, which is useful to put on the hands and moisturize them, but I do not recommend having ingesting paraben. Pharmaceuticals do have some of these in them, which is really scary. Talking about air fresheners, I told you about that. The furniture, which is mainly the flame retardants, but it also has some phthalates. Also, artificially scented candles and antimicrobial products, but even some of the things that are in our home, like manufactured wood, does also have certain toxins that can cause us to have sensitivity issues. Okay, let's see here. All right, so one of the number one things that I recommend putting on your phone is this EWG Healthy Living app. So I've talked a lot about EWG. It's the Environmental Working Group. They are a not-for-profit. They do not follow any government regulations. And they basically state it how it is, like they do with the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. And they're very reasonable about what they do. But they have this app, which I think is fantastic. It actually works for any kind of household cleaning items and personal care items. So the household cleaning items, you go through a to F ratio, or A to F grading system, I should say, in this EWG Healthy Living app, but you can look up floor cleaners, and it will give you from A to F many of the floor cleaners that we find. For example, I just looked up one time all the ones in Home Depot for floor cleaners, and they're all C for different reasons. But you can find A's and you can find them a lot of times on Amazon. So that's one way to kind of look at your household cleaners. But honestly, vinegar and water works really well on most surfaces. Personal care items, you go through a 1 through 10 rating system. Actually 0 is, it goes 0 to 10. So 0 is your personal care items that are considered to be the absolute best and have the EWG rating. And then you have 1 through 10 that are different ones, different ratings. And if you click on it, this is what I love, and this is for all of them. If you click on it, it will tell you why it gave it that rating. Is there carcinogens in there? Are there toxins in there? Is it just have a little bit of an allergic effect for some people? So like for some of them, there are 4 or 5, but it's a hypersensitivity issue that is the reason why they're getting that rating. And if you've been using that product and it hasn't caused you hypersensitivity, then maybe you don't have to worry about that. So it gives you a good ability to say, okay, that is acceptable to me or it's not acceptable to me. But I love the EWG Healthy Living app, and I think it can be very helpful. All right, so this is kind of saying where these different things can be. So flame retardants can be found in your kitchen appliances, easy chair, couches, electronics, carpet padding, and foam baby items. So also in your kids' pajamas or any wrinkle-free material. Flame retardants have never been found to be helpful in reducing the fire enough to save anyone. So there really is no specific need or use for these. They can absorb through the skin. They cause an estrogenic effect. And they cause endocrine, thyroid, reproductive, and immune toxicity. And it has negative effects on child development, including autism. So there is a lot of reason to stay away from these. You can actually find certain furniture without it. Any furniture that states that it goes by the California regulation actually does not have flame retardants in it. They do not allow furniture in the state of California that has flame retardants. So a couple of them, like Flex Steel and oh my gosh, there's a really common one that I'm totally blanking on. but there's a couple really big companies that do follow that regulation. So you can find these types of things, and say you're looking for a furniture that is already used, you can always look at the bottom and it should have a little tag on it that says whether it follows the California laws on flame retardants. So let's talk about a few of the others. Phthalates can cause endocrine toxicity. It has negative effects on growth and neurodevelopment, just like flame retardants do. You find it in lubricating oils, soaps, shampoos, hairsprays, cosmetics, vinyl flooring, garden hoses, and medical tubing. And that's really scary. I have not figured out a way or have the energy to do something about the medical tubing, but that is really scary, that anytime that you are in the hospital, that to know that phthalates are actually in the medical tubing. DMDM, as I said before, can cause like an allergic type of reaction. It can also cause hair loss if it's in your shampoos and conditioners. So, if that is a concern of yours, I recommend not having that. Parabens are an estrogen-like compound and crosstalk with HER2. Some people may not know what HER2 is. HER2 is one of those receptors that we look at for breast cancer. And because it can crosstalk with HER2, it can cause early puberty for girls and delayed puberty for boys. It is found in personal care products, pharmaceuticals, cosmetics, beers, sauces, and processed desserts. Lauryl sulfates, increased sensitivity, can clog pores and cause acne. But probably the worst part is it releases pro-inflammatory chemicals and mediators into your body that increase pain. So, especially if you do suffer from any kind of chronic pain, I would highly recommend not using anything with lauryl sulfates in it. And then triclosan, it's a long list. Asthma, allergy, food sensitivity, spontaneous abortion, inflammation. It can cause hepatitis and cancer. It can cause colitis or inflammation of the colon. It can cause thyroid disease, neurodevelopment dysfunction, and reproductive disorders. So I know that everybody, especially after COVID, is really, wants those antimicrobials, find something more natural and make sure alcohol works. And alcohol has never been found to be negative outside of drinking too much of it. So I highly recommend making sure that any antimicrobial that you use does not have triclosan in it. All right, so how can we kind of remediate this? Well, we talked about some of that, but the EWG Healthy Living app, I cannot say it enough. I think it can be really helpful when you're looking at personal care products, cosmetics, perfumes, and your household cleaners. Buy furniture without flame retardants, and sometimes that's a slower process, but every time you do something along that lines, the better off you are. Vinegar and water work great on hard flooring, countertops, and sinks. So those things can definitely be used for that. The recommendation is to vacuum and dust regularly to clear toxic dust, so that you're not breathing it in. I didn't talk a lot about electromagnetic fields. Those do affect people as well. As a matter of fact, men who leave their computers on their laps to do work have actually had a problem with sperm counts and fertility issues. But there's also a lot of other questions and issues. I don't recommend putting the phone to the ear. I recommend, if you're going to sleep with your phone beside you, to put it in airplane mode. And if you're going to put a computer on your lap, to put something in between you and the computer. So those would be some of the main household rules that I have that we can actually directly affect. So this is how I feel when I take all my reusable bags to the grocery store, trying to help out the environment as much as I can. So I hope that this was very helpful to you in finding ways to kind of minimize household toxins. This is my research, and at any point in time, if you do have questions about my research, please let me know. And so these are my two different research pages. And I did put what it was pertaining to as I was going through, so people could actually see that. So this is one of the pages, and this is the second page. So now what we're going to do is we're going to see about taking some questions. So let me look at the chat box for that. The question is, should you use avocados, or should you wash avocados before cutting them? Any type of food that has an actual outside covering kind of already has a little bit of a protection. So you don't really have to wash them before cutting it. If you feel better or safer to wash it, it's perfectly fine to wash it, but it's not absolutely necessary. I did not specifically see a link between artificial sweeteners and dementia. I did get pretty deep into some of those, and like we were talking about with the sucralose, there's mostly a specific link with aspartame and saccharin to cancers, and then with sucralose, there's leukemia, the obesity, pregnancy issues, irritability and inflammation with IBS and IBD, and issues with changes in gut microbiome are the biggest ones that we definitively have. The next question I see is that how often do you recommend cleaning the air ducts? Honestly, air ducts are really pretty important. You do get a lot of things down there. I'd recommend cleaning them about once a year. And depending on your air filters, between 6 months to a year, depending on like what the recommendation is on the filter itself. The question is there any difference between new homes and old homes? Most of the older homes are made with actual real wood. So yes, there's a lot more fabricated materials in new homes that have been given the environmental go-ahead, but I feel that there's going to be more and more information that comes out about different fabricated materials and what they have in them and how they can affect our health, such as the vinyl flooring having phthalates in them, and then those phthalates break down and create dust, and then you breathe it in. Plus, phthalates do have some of an absorption through the skin potential. So in a sense, depending on how old the house is, I would say outside of the money you would put into fixing it up, any house that was made with actual hardwood material is probably going to be safer than some of the newer fabricated materials of today. So it asked about the fermented foods and nitrates. So nitrate is a food preservative. So the nitrates are usually found in some of the fermented foods as a preservative. There is also, for example, kimchi can be extremely healthy, and if put appropriately into a can be well preserved for a long period of time, as most fermented foods can. But sometimes the processor will actually put a preservative in it, like a nitrate, to help keep it a little bit better. So it's usually ones that have not been fully fermented, such as sauerkrauts and things like that. And you would just have to look to see if it stated something about nitrates or nitrites, or finding ones that are higher quality, that are actually truly fermented and processed appropriately. So the next question is about silicone. Silicone is actually not the same and is actually relatively safe for humans, not to ingest per se, but it doesn't break down that easily. And so it is not considered a plastic in the same sense, even though it seems like a little bit like a plastic. So silicone is actually relatively safe for putting food into. And from a freezing perspective, I think that glass is still the safest. No matter what, glass is still the safest. But silicone is an option. So cleaning products that can be safe but still kill germs. Vinegar. Vinegar is acetic acid, and it will kill bacteria. So that one is easily used. It's around the house. White vinegar works great. So I highly recommend that. But there are several cleaning products that can be used that you would find on the EWG app that would be very helpful from a cleaning perspective for killing bacteria. Also, I do want to state, though, in regards to that our gut microbiome is actually really important. And we don't just have a gut microbiome, we have a microbiome on our skin, in our, in our mouth and our nose. We have it everywhere. And the more sterile our environment, the more likely we are to have hypersensitivities. This is kind of off topic, but I think it's important that hypersensitivity issues have been studied and been found that the more sterile the environment, the more likely a person or child is to have hypersensitivity issues. So although you do want to clean your house and you definitely want to dust and vacuum regularly and clean up, that it is not absolutely necessary to have a completely sterile environment. There was one last question. Freezing with plastic, I do not recommend plastics at all for any food containers. The acids in the food itself will break down the plastics. Water itself is not acidic at all, and just putting water in a plastic container causes microplastics to be in the container and in the water. So I do not recommend plastic at all for foods ever. Okay, I think that was the last question. Hopefully, if you have any other questions, you can definitely send me a message. I hope this was helpful for you. This is, like I said, a passionate topic for me because I think it's really important that we as humans have the knowledge to be able to protect ourselves as much as possible. And so there's a lot of things that can be done, but these are probably the best ones that I found to be most doable from that perspective. And I hope you really enjoyed this. Just to let you know that most of my past webinars are on YouTube, and all you have to do is just search my name, Jessica Ridgley, DO, and it will come up if you'd like to see any of those. My next one is going to be on dementia and ways we can help to prevent dementia as we age. So I hope that you enjoyed this, and I hope you have a good night.